Have you ever noticed how some people seem to have an almost supernatural control over the environment around them without saying a word? They don't shout, they don't beg, they simply withdraw, and suddenly everything changes. The energy shifts. People start to question, to chase after, to feel. Now imagine if you did the same. If you stopped reacting immediately to everything. If you chose silence instead of the automatic response, retreat instead of explosion, what do you think would happen? That's where the point lies. When you stop being always available emotionally, physically, psychologically, the world around you goes into crisis because people are used to controlling you through your reactions, through your impulses, through your predictability. But the day you choose to withdraw, the game changes, and those who thought they knew you realize they know absolutely nothing about you. Carl Jung said everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. Now think about this. When you become inaccessible, who really gets desperate? Who gets irritated? Who tries to provoke you just to elicit some emotion back? This reveals more about them than about you. And it mainly reveals how much you are still being manipulated. Without realizing it, you keep giving yourself to please, to maintain peace, to not lose people who deep down were never really with you. And with every forced yes, every immediate response, every emotional reaction, you give away a piece of your energy. And at the end of the day, what's left? Tiredness, frustration, and emptiness. You can't explain. You have been taught to always be present, to respond quickly, to please, to say yes, even when you wanted to say no. Since childhood, you have been conditioned to believe that your worth lies in how available you are to others. But here's a truth that perhaps no one has told you with this clarity. This excessive availability is not a virtue. It is a prison. And as long as you continue to think that you need to be accessible all the time, emotionally or otherwise, you will be manipulated, drained, and forgotten. As soon as you are no longer useful, do you know why? Because being always available makes you seem predictable. And everything that is predictable becomes a tool. People start to use you as an emotional emergency button. They press it when they want attention, relief, validation, and then put you back on the shelf. But you don't realize this, because you are trapped in an illusion that being present for everyone will make someone be present for you. But it doesn't work that way. Carl Jung spoke about the persona, this mask we wear to be accepted, loved, recognized. And it is exactly this mask that keeps you overly available. You say it's okay when you are suffocating. You respond to messages immediately, even when you are exhausted. You explain yourself, justify yourself, defend yourself, as if you owe something to the world. But the truth is that the more you place yourself at the center of others' stage, the more you disappear from your own. Being available all the time is a subtle form of self-abandonment. Meet Marcus, a 32-year-old software engineer who has turned people-pleasing into an art form and is slowly dying inside because of it. Marcus's phone buzzes every few minutes with someone who needs something, a coworker asking him to cover extra shifts, a friend wanting emotional support for the same relationship drama for the 100th time, family members expecting him to be the reliable one who never says no. Marcus has built his entire identity around being helpful, dependable, the guy who always comes through. But what started as genuine kindness has become a compulsive need to be needed. He works late to finish other people's projects, skips his own plans to accommodate others' schedules, and finds himself saying, "Of course, no problem," when every fiber of his being wants to scream no. The irony is crushing. The more available Marcus makes himself, The less people seem to value him. His boss takes his extra work for granted. His friends only call when they need something. And his family assumes he'll always be there to solve their problems. Marcus has become so focused on maintaining his image as the reliable one that he's lost touch with his own needs, desires, and boundaries. He can't remember the last time he did something purely for himself. The last time he felt genuinely appreciated rather than just useful. Jung would recognize Marcus as someone whose persona has completely overtaken his authentic self. He's become a function rather than a person, a role rather than an individual. The tragedy is that Marcus genuinely believes this is love, this is connection, this is how relationships work. He doesn't realize that his constant availability has made him invisible, that his inability to say no has made his yes meaningless. Carl Jung did not see the human psyche as an automatic machine that reacts to stimuli without consequences. For him, our mind is like an energy system, and every thought, emotion, and action consumes a part of that energy. The question is, are you choosing where your energy goes, or are you letting the world decide for you? Every time you react impulsively, you are wasting psychic energy. When you defend yourself against criticism that didn't even deserve attention, when you respond to a provocation just to prove you are right, when you engage in useless discussions, when you try to please those who do not value you, you are spending your inner strength on what does not nourish you. And Jung was clear that what you resist persists. The more you react, the more you bind yourself. People who live emotionally drained are not weak. They are misdirected. And do you know what happens to someone who lives exhausted? They become vulnerable. And when you are vulnerable, you become easy prey. Manipulative, opportunistic, and emotionally needy people can sense this. They notice that you do not know how to guard your energy, that you react to everything, that you're always trying to solve the world, and they take advantage of it. Jung said that a healthy psyche is one that knows how to keep energy within the system. This means knowing how to say no without guilt, knowing how to remain silent without feeling cowardly, knowing how to observe before acting. Because true power is not in reacting, it is in choosing when and how to act. You think you are in control. You believe your reactions are conscious choices, but the truth is darker. Most of your emotional responses are programmed, and those who understand this manipulate you easily. Opportunistic people don't need to raise their voices, threaten, or force situations. They just trigger the buttons you've left exposed, and you react always. Carl Jung called this projection, the psychological mechanism through which people project onto others what they cannot see in themselves. But there is another side to this phenomenon that few notice. While others project onto you, you also become the receptacle for these images, and the more emotionally available you are, the more you become a blank canvas for these projections. You know that friend who only reaches out when they are in crisis, that partner who always needs you to save the day, that person who praises you but only as long as you are useful to them. None of this is by chance. They are not relating to you. They are relating to the idea of you, to the role you agree to play. And why do you agree? Because you are afraid of disappointing, afraid of not being loved, afraid of being abandoned. The most effective manipulation doesn't happen in shouting. It happens in the silence of guilt. When you feel that you owe something to the other, when you believe you need to be available, need to help, need to understand, even when it destroys you And here is the central point. The manipulator doesn't need to control you. They just need you to keep reacting the same way. But when you stop reacting, the game breaks. When you start saying no, responding with silence, with silence, withdrawing instead of explaining yourself. The projections begin to crumble. The mask they put on you falls, and this leaves people unsettled because they no longer know who you are. And worse, now they are forced to look at themselves. And not everyone is prepared for that. Your unavailability is a threat because it forces others to confront their own emptiness. The silence you offer reveals the internal noise they don't want to hear. And then comes the attack, the criticism, the emotional drama. Not because you are wrong, but because you stop serving as a convenient mirror. Jung said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." When you withdraw, when you stop feeding the cycle, the other's shadow begins to emerge. And this is unbearable for those who have always used you as an escape. But what about you? Are you ready to deal with the discomfort of being misunderstood, rejected, or even attacked for protecting yourself? Are you ready to endure the silence that comes after the rupture? Because it is precisely in that silence that a new kind of power is born. Marcus experienced this firsthand when he stopped responding to his co-workers' constant requests for help with projects that weren't his responsibility. The co-worker's reaction was immediate and telling, first confusion, then anger, then attempts to guilt-trip Marcus back into compliance. "You've changed," became the accusation, as if maintaining boundaries was somehow a betrayal. But Marcus was learning that when you stop being everyone's solution, they're forced to find their own resources. I want you to pause and honestly examine your own patterns of availability. How often do you say yes when you mean no? How many times do you respond immediately to messages, even when you're exhausted or busy? When someone criticizes your newfound boundaries, how quickly do you rush to explain and justify yourself? Here's a revealing question. Who in your life would be most upset if you suddenly became less available? Those people often reveal the most about the transactional nature of your relationships. Jung believed that our strongest triggers point to our deepest unconscious patterns. If someone's withdrawal makes you panic, what does that say about your own need for control? If someone's boundaries make you angry, what does that reveal about how you've been using? The people who respect your boundaries are the ones who genuinely care about you as a person. The ones who fight your boundaries only cared about you as a function. Share in the comments one area where you suspect you've been too available, where your helpfulness has become compulsive rather than conscious. Not to judge yourself, but to begin recognizing the patterns that Jung knew must be made conscious before they can be changed. Sometimes the first step toward healthy boundaries is simply acknowledging where they've been missing. The modern world is noisy. Everyone wants to be heard, wants to respond quickly, wants to win pointless debates and prove their point, even if it costs them their own peace. But there is a power that few know, and even fewer master: the power of silence. Not the silence of passivity or cowardice, but conscious, strategic, brutally lucid silence. The kind of silence that is not absence, but amplified presence. Jung saw silence not as a void, but as a fertile ground for inner transformation. When you stop reacting, you begin to observe, and by observing, you see patterns that previously went unnoticed. Emotional repetitions, manipulation games, cycles of self-sabotage. Silence allows for lucidity, and lucidity is dangerous for those who live to control you. Have you noticed how some people panic when you don't respond, when you don't explain yourself, when you simply disappear? It's not because they miss you. It's because your silence takes away their narrative control. While you speak, you are still in the game. But when you are silent, you change the rules, and that unbalances anyone who thrives on your reaction. True silence is not the absence of voice. It is mastery over one's own energy. It is the refusal to be dragged down by someone else's emotions. It is the conscious choice not to engage in battles that are not worth your wear. Jung said that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, requires this distancing, because only in silence can you listen to yourself without the world's interference. But don't be fooled. Silence has a price. It will distance you from people who only valued you for the role you played. It will make you incomprehensible to those who only saw you through their own projections. It will make you seem cold, distant, arrogant. But all of this is a reaction from those who never wanted to deal with your depth, only with your utility. And here is the hard truth. The more you mature, the more selective you become with your words, because you understand that each sentence is an energetic investment, and not everyone deserves access to your truth. Sometimes silence is not retreat. It is sovereignty. It is the language of those who no longer need to prove anything to anyone. Silence is uncomfortable because it forces the other to deal with their own thoughts, with their own internal noise. And this discomfort reveals more about them than any argument of yours could reveal. Marcus learned this lesson when he stopped engaging in his family's weekly drama sessions. His sudden unavailability for their emotional chaos forced them to confront their own pattern. Some family members accused him of being selfish, but others began to respect his boundaries and even started developing their own. Jung understood that individuation often requires what he called the necessary solitude, periods where you must withdraw from collective consciousness to discover your individual truth. This isn't misanthropy or superiority, it's psychological necessity. Marcus discovered that in the silence he'd been avoiding, he could finally hear his own voice, his actual preferences, his genuine desires, his authentic responses to life. It's no use understanding all of this intellectually if in practice you continue saying yes when you mean no, responding to messages that bother you, participating in empty conversations, and maintaining relationships that only exist out of inertia. Awareness without action is just another form of self-deception. True transformation begins when you firmly decide to become selective, and this requires emotional discipline. Conscious unavailability is not about being cold, arrogant, or indifferent. It's about no longer being accessible to anyone at any time for any reason. It's about taking control of your own energy, your own time, your own peace. And this starts with small actions, not responding immediately, breathing before reacting, leaving a discussion before being dragged into chaos. Turning off your phone without guilt, saying not today, saying I'm not interested, saying I won't get involved. But here's the most important part: you don't need to justify your absence. You don't need to explain your silence. You owe nothing to anyone but yourself. And this, for many people, is unforgivable, because when you refuse to explain yourself, you take away the other person's power to keep you within an emotional narrative where you are always the helpful, understanding, accessible one. Marcus started with simple practices: declining non-essential meetings, not checking emails after 7 p.m., letting calls go to voicemail instead of answering immediately. Each small act of conscious unavailability built his capacity for larger boundary. He learned that no is a complete sentence that requires no justification, no explanation, no apology. When you stop being available to everyone, something profound begins to happen. First comes the silence, an uncomfortable silence that seems to scream inside you. You wonder if you did the right thing, if you are being too harsh, if you are losing people who liked you. But gradually this silence transforms It begins to cleanse, to calm, to heal. And then comes solitude, but not the solitude of absence. It is the solitude of total presence, your own. The solitude of the strong, the solitude of the strong, the solitude of one who no longer betrays themselves to keep others close. And in that space where there was once confusion, clarity enters. Where there was once anxiety, peace enters. Where there was once neediness, a new kind of strength enters, the strength of being whole within yourself. Carl Jung said that the process of individuation, becoming who you really are, requires you to distance yourself from the collective, that you disidentify from the mask, that you walk alone for a while. And that is exactly what you are doing when you decide to become unavailable. You are not fleeing the world. You are returning to yourself. It is at this point that you stop being a reactor and become a creator. You cease to be shaped by circumstances and begin to shape your reality from within. The people who feel uncomfortable with your absence reveal that they never wanted you. They wanted the role you played. And now that you no longer fit, they don't know what to do with you. And that is liberating. You will lose people, but you will find yourself. You will distance yourself from places, but you will reconnect with your essence. You will become misunderstood, but finally, you will begin to be respected. Because when you are no longer available for anything, you become valuable, rare, unforgettable. And don't be fooled. This is a rebirth, a new beginning. The start of a life where you are no longer available for emotional crumbs, for mind games, for voids disguised as affection. Now you only accept what resonates with your peace, with your truth, with your wholeness. And if you have made it this far, it's because a part of you is already ready for this new path. A part of you has already understood that being loved means nothing. If for that you have to abandon yourself, and that true self-love begins when you choose yourself, even if it costs you to be alone for a while. Now tell me in the comments, are you ready to be misunderstood, rejected, or even hated in the name of your inner freedom? Are you willing to pay the price of being you? If this message touched you, if it made sense, write in the comments. I choose my peace. Let's see how many here are ready for this transition. Starting today, practice conscious unavailability in small ways. Let that phone call go to voicemail. Take time before responding to that demanding message. Say no to one request that doesn't align with your values or energy. Notice who respects your boundaries and who fights them. The ones who fight your boundaries were never really your people anyway. Jung's path of individuation isn't comfortable, but it's the only path to authentic living. When you stop being available to everyone, you become available to yourself. When you stop being everything to everyone, you become someone to yourself. And in that space of conscious choice and self-respect, you'll find the peace that no external validation could ever provide.